Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest reports that Thames Water has simply not been facing up to its financial responsibility and situation, and there's talk that they are rapidly approaching the point of being completely unsustainable and taken into public hands. Now, if this happens, of course, what is the pathway, realistically, in making sure the nationalisation remains in place and other water companies follow? Can it be done and without election losing costs? But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So The Guardian's been reporting on a little investigation it carried out into Thames Water. This is the water company that for some time has been described in the media as the most urgent risk of going to the wall. Their investigations found evidence that the companies failed to deal with any urgent upgrades of infrastructure, including IT systems. They're apparently using a system from the 1980s. There's also accusations of intimidation of staff, that Thames Water's financial situation is worse than reported, and nobody seems to know just how bad their position is, including within the company. Ofwat are apparently investigating these claims. Now, regardless of exactly what's going on behind the scenes, Thames Water is clearly a failing company. It is just a matter of when it fails and how much it costs us. That's because, political views aside, if a water company fails, its work must still continue as a vital public service, so it will have to be taken into public hands. Which is, again, one of the... I'm going to discuss a few of the nonsenses of privatising essential utilities, and one of them is, like a normal business, if it fails, it fails. Whereas with a public utility, the public have to rescue it if the privatisation fails. When this happens, the idea is always that it's temporary. But in my opinion, there's always a special sort of madness in doing that for a water company. See, whenever you ask someone who supports privatisation of essential services, the justifications just do not apply to water companies. Like, oh, competition will keep the prices down, the quality high. Well, this hasn't happened for any privatised utility, has it? Even where there's genuine competition, like, for example, mobile phones or broadband or something like that, look, compared to other countries, it's rubbish in this country. Absolutely appalling. Yet we pay high prices. But it's especially untrue of water companies because there's no competition. Like, energy is another one where you don't really have competition, but you have the illusion of competition. Like, you can choose which energy company you will pay your bills with. So you can have two neighbours that have got different energy companies. So it sounds like competition. It's not true because all of the electricity comes from the national grid and all of the gas comes through the same pipelines. But you can pretend there's competition because you and your neighbour have got different energy companies, right? But your water company, you don't get to choose that. That is determined by your postcode. Simple as that. No say in the matter. The other argument is that a private company is run more efficiently because politicians provide poor leadership. Now, yes, it's true that some ministers will have weak leadership and project management skills. Also, if the government is particularly chaotic, you're going to see regular changes of ministers, meaning no continuity of strategy. I can absolutely accept the argument that a professional executive overseeing the strategic direction of a company is better than that. But there are three things to counter that. The first is that the privatised company is entirely focused on profits and short-term profits at that. And that is because privatised utilities, they're not actually being run as a private business. A private business has an owner who cares about the long-term financial health of the company. These privatised companies are controlled by investment funds, effectively, mostly from outside the UK. They have short-term return concerns, and they'll just switch to another cash cow when they've bled this one dry. But that focus on profits rather than service means it doesn't matter how professional the executives in charge are, they're not even trying to deliver a strategic direction that's in the public interest. Their bosses are in Dubai, not London. Second, there is no reason why the government can't just appoint executives just as they would in the private sector, run it in exactly the same way, same pay and bonus structures, but the bonus structures centred around delivering services to budget rather than profit at all costs. And you still take out that profit part of it. And the third reason is the results speak for themselves. Water companies have failed to deliver the investment that was promised decades ago, not just this one company. Like, Thames Water's using a computer system from the year water was privatised. That means they have never themselves ever upgraded their computer systems in all the time they've been operating. They have provably come in, done the day-to-day stuff, but not invested a penny and yet managed to rack up huge debts, and without a government takeover, people around London and parts of the south of England would simply be without water supply. Simple as that. And Thames Water is just the most advanced case of cancer in the industry. Others will follow. The arguments for privatisation are all provably bollocks now. So what next? Well, put it off or not, Thames Water obviously cannot rescue itself. It has no plan. It doesn't look like it's even trying. It doesn't even look like it's attempting to fix its infrastructure problems. So at the moment, it's throwing money into a leaky bucket. It will have to be nationalised. That will cost the taxpayer. It will further cost the taxpayer the money needed to then carry out the investment. It will be important to sack off as much of the debt as possible to reduce those costs. But there are going to be those costs. There's no way of recouping that money as well. All the money that was taken is long gone. It wasn't illegal, so you can't just say we'll launch investigations like they are for the COVID fraud, for example. That there's actual cases of fraud there with PPE and furlough fraud. It wasn't fraud with water companies. It was all legal. The government allowed them to do it. And the vast majority of that money is not even in the country anyway. Long gone. So we'll have to take on the debt. That is the principal reason why we can't just nationalise water as quickly as possible. And it's also why, the government will genuinely not want other water companies to be following suit too quickly. Because if the government do that, so the money they would need, then all that investment that was announced by Rachel Reeves recently, that's gone. Because we need the money to plug in the holes of water companies. And so you lose the next election because you'll be using the money for water companies, but people think, well, we've already got water companies, we're not getting anything new. The Tories would then come in, reprivatise the water companies, use the money raised to offer a few tax cuts, win the following election, then trash the economy as usual. There's another problem as well, cited by Labour for the election. So to permanently nationalise water companies requires a lot of legislation. The government have a lot of legislation to pass in order to get our national infrastructure functioning again, and they're prioritising that. So there isn't really time in the schedule. But there will come a point in a few years where if things are working better, if Labour have got their reforms through, you would expect less pressure on the parliamentary timetable. So it could work like this. Thames Water is going to have to be nationalised, I suppose, next year sometime. We need to make sure that the debt taken on is as low as possible. When we find out how much we have to take on, that also gives you a bit of an idea into how it could work for other water companies. How cheaply can we get this back into public hands? And that's what may cause the delays in this happening. The fact that the government will not want to take on more debt than it has to. The more debt we take on, the less money there is for actual public spending. It's that simple. Now, the way this usually works is the government returns the company to financial health, then sells it off again using the proceeds to recoup the costs of nationalising it and then getting it back on its feet, right? This is what happened over a long time, for example, with the Royal Bank of Scotland shares. We nationalised it during the banking crisis, and then we've slowly sold off our stake over time, and I think the rest is due to be sold off next year. The default idea is the same with any temporary nationalisation, but could it be permanent? Well, that will depend on a few things, but primarily I think it's this. The reason why temporary nationalisations are released back into the wild is because it gives the Treasury an injection of cash, which could be used to more public-pleasing effects elsewhere. For example, imagine this future where we've nationalised Thames Water, it's now working again, it's doing its stuff, and the government, by keeping it, aren't giving the public anything extra. Whereas if they sell it back, they can use that money to bring them something extra. For a Tory government, it would be tax cuts. For a Labour government, a boost to public services. But let's say that by the time the water company has been repaired, demands on the public purse have eased a little bit due to economic growth, and the nationalised water companies are bringing in enough money to be considered a useful asset to the government, then maybe the need for a quick cash injection is reduced. Now, it will always be there, because the Treasury can always do something with money. But if other water companies go the same way, public opinion may harden more against reprivatising them and, selling them back, may prove unpopular. And I think that would probably be a really important factor because, like I said, you give the Treasury an option of an easy injection of cash for other projects and they'll take it. And like I say, in a few years' time, Labour should have seen most of their biggest reforms legislated. So then time could be found for the legislation needed to make nationalisation of water companies who have failed more permanent in the same way that they have with rail companies. And I think those are probably the conditions which would need to exist to make this a real move towards nationalisation. Oh, and the Tories not winning power again in the foreseeable future, of course. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.